Hey everyone, today we're going to take a look at finding and exploiting privilege escalation vulnerabilities using PowerShell Empire, specifically the PowerUp module. So we're going to assume we already have an unprivileged agent here. So we can go ahead and interact with that. You can see in the username field here, there's not an asterisk next to it, so it's not an elevated agent. We're going to use the PowerUp module, which is under privesc, PowerUp, and we're going to use the all checks, which is going to run everything that PowerUp checks for. Nothing we need to fill out for that. Run that. Takes a minute to come back. All right. And it spits out lots of different things here, which we'll take a look through. Start from the top here. Tells you each thing it checks for here. Today we're going to be interested in these vulnerable services. So you can see these gupdate services, which is the Google updater. Not sure exactly why, but PowerUp loves to give these back to you as vulnerable, which if you look at the modifiable file in the output here, it's listed as the Z drive, which on this computer is the user's home directory that gets mapped from a network share. So from the user's point of view, that's modifiable, but what that service runs as local system is not going to have that Z directory in its path when it runs, so that is ultimately not exploitable. This OpenVPNService output, though, looks much more promising. Our modifiable file is under the program files directory, and we can see that anybody in built-in users has permissions to, well, delete, write attributes, a whole bunch of things, but ultimately modify that file. And also importantly, it appears that we can restart this service, which means we don't have to wait around for the system to reboot or the user to do something. So we can take a look at the rest of the output here. Most of the checks PowerUp does usually don't return anything. That's just sort of how Windows systems go. You can see this unattend file here. Those are always worth checking out. I happen to know we do not have passwords in this one, however. If we go take a look at our service we identified here, what we want to do next in order to exploit this is to replace that service exe that we can modify with an exe that's going to launch a new PowerShell Empire agent. And then when we start the service, it's going to run that exe as local system. So our standard user has permissions to start the OpenVPN service. OpenVPN service will then run its executable as system. If we replace that executable with a stager, we get an agent as system. So you can see PowerUp gives us an abuse function here. If we were in a normal PowerShell console where we had imported PowerUp, we could just run that. But in this case, we're going to need to use a different Empire module to get that done. So let's go back to our agent here. And again, under privesc, we're going to use another PowerUp module, this time service exe stager, which is going to do exactly that abuse function we needed. You can look at the name under the info and see that that lines up. So we're just going to need to provide, it looks like, a listener and a service name. Listener is going to be whatever you already have set up, in our case HTTP, and the service name is OpenVPNService. Go ahead and run that. it will warn you about the module not being OPSEC safe, which we are replacing an exe on disk, and you'll see also dropping a bat file somewhere else. So definitely not great, but we're not worried about that right now. Okay, looks like that ran. So in theory, we should just be able to restart that OpenVPN service and get ourselves a new agent here. So if we go ahead and stop it first, should be stopped, but for good luck, just using the net command here. And then we'll do a net start OpenVPN service. Let that run. Okay, started successfully. So this is where you should get an agent. But clearly something hasn't worked correctly. I knew this was going to happen, having done it before. So let's go ahead and dive into what went wrong here. We can take a look at that program files directory where the service exe we attempted to replace is. So under here, we should see a newly made OpenVPNServe2.exe, but in fact, it looks like it has not been replaced. We still have an old date on there. And while it's possible to fake dates, I don't believe PowerShell Empire does that in this case. So one way or another, we failed to replace this exe using Empire. Now, if you wanted to, or had access, if you run PowerUp in a PowerShell console, it'll be much better about outputting errors, and you could see what went wrong. But we know we have permissions to do this, so we're just going to work on another method to get around this part that didn't work. We'll go ahead and start with moving this service that we want to modify to a backup file, just so that we can write to that exe without worrying about losing the original. That way, when we're all done getting our agent, it'll be possible to return the system to its normal functioning state. So we'll just use a move command to take that exe and put it in a .back file. This move also has the advantage of kind of confirming to ourselves that we can definitely modify that file. So if we list that directory again, we should see that we did actually have permissions to change that. Yep, there's our new backup file. You could certainly do something more stealthy with this backup if you were so inclined, but that's not our focus today. Now that we have that backed up, we're going to use a different PowerUp module to create that service exe stager. So let's take a look at the source of PowerUp for a second here. Since this isn't built into Empire, we're going to have to make up the command ourselves. The module is called write service binary. And we can see here under the description that writes a specified command to a service executable and writes that to wherever you want. Now, because this function isn't in Empire as a module unto itself, we're going to need to use a different Empire module that allows us to run arbitrary functions. So it's going to be use module management invoke script. And here we're going to be able to specify the entire PowerUp file and then that specific function we want to run. So the script path is going to be the location of PowerUp on our system. You can find that under the Empire directory, wherever you have Empire installed, data, module source, privesc, PowerUp.ps1. And then for the command, we're actually going to go ahead and build that in our notepad because it's going to be a little lengthy. So it's going to start with that function name, write service binary, and then let's see what arguments we're going to require here. A service name, that's our OpenVPN service. The path is going to be that program file's path that we've been looking at this time, including the exe name. So OpenVPN bin OpenVPNServe2.exe. And then we need a command. So we're going to use the bat file that we actually created when we ran the last module. But if you didn't have that bat file already there, you could create your own bat file and upload. You could host a PowerShell script or bat file on your attacker machine and then put a download cradle in this command. What you're not going to be able to do is put an entire PowerUp or PowerShell Empire launcher in here, simply because this write service binary just doesn't accept that long of a command to put into its exe. So that's the location of the bat file that the other module output, and then we can set our command to be this whole long thing. And you'll see why we put it in Notepad, because something in Empire or the Kali terminal does not deal with wrapping lines very nicely. But you can see it did accept the input. So that should be all we need. Go ahead and run that. Give that a moment to run, and then we'll have another go at restarting our service. And if we successfully wrote that stager exe to our service location, we should actually get an agent this time. So go ahead and do a net stop OpenVPN service. Let that come back. And then a net start OpenVPN service. Hey, that looks much better. You can see we got a new agent this time. Always good to see the green text. Can go look at our agents and see that it is running as system as we wanted. So if we interact with that, we can just kind of verify it is what it says it is. Sure enough, running as NT Authority system. Alright, that is what it looks like to exploit a vulnerable service using PowerShell Empire and PowerUp. Next time, we're going to take a look at what we can do with our new privileged agent here, namely dumping some credentials with Mimikatz. So stay tuned, and I will see you again soon.